Jake Paul has just lost his first ever fight to Tommy Fury by split decision. G, what was your initial reaction to this fight?
I think it was a super exciting fight. I mean, very back and forth. I think it was marketed perfectly. This was a 50-50 fight. And, when you look at it now in hindsight, this was a fight Tommy Fury had to win. I mean, he is the professional boxer. He's the guy that's been boxing since he was like 10 odd years old. Jake's only been doing this for 5 years. And look, I don't want to be one of those guys that completely slanders Jake Paul for all the shit he talks. He builds fights perfectly. I mean, he puts asses in seats. He makes people want to watch him lose.
That's true.
And to see him in 5 years do this and really close the gap between him and a Tommy Fury is beyond impressive. I mean, in the boxing world, that's like these are years but those are years and like gaps of experience. But it's just when someone's doing it from when they were a kid, it's just so different. And I gotta give Jake all the credit. I'm not gonna completely kick him when he's down, but I think from what Tommy was able to do, Tommy did what he had to do. He had to win this fight. I think it was fairly comfortable. I think there was very questionable refereeing decisions. I mean, I would never hire that ref to even judge or even ref a fight in a backyard, man. I mean, like
We
literally
need
this
VAR
guy.
for that fight.
Yeah, no, maybe you don't even want that, but there was just so many weird, decisions that he's making, point deductions that were kind of like scratching your head, not really understanding. But it didn't really take away that much for the fight. I think the guy that was supposed to win did win. So I mean, other than that, I think if we're going to probably touch upon it in a second, the rematch calls that they were alluding to after the match, I think that's something that it's probably going to happen anyway, even if we want to see it or not. But before I get into that, I want to ask you what you thought, because we were kind of both there, watching it there technically.
I think it was a very interesting fight. I mean, like you said it perfectly. Jake Paul, he knows how to market these fights, and he makes people want to watch. I mean, everyone was trying to watch this fight, and whether or not you hate Jake Paul or not, you wanted to see this result either way. And for me, I mean, I'm not going to say that I sit there and watch every single boxing fight, but I wanted to see this fight just like I watch every Jake Paul fight because I want to see what's going to happen. And we know with this fight, my main takeaway is that Tommy Fury looked like the better boxer, and obviously with all of his experience, I mean, he's literally Tyson Fury's brother, and he's been doing it since he was a kid. He should be the better boxer, and he looked like he was the better boxer. But it was impressive how Jake Paul, he didn't look that much worse. I mean, Tommy Fury was better. I'll give him that. But Jake Paul, like you said, he did close that gap, and I think it was impressive for Jake Paul to hold his own. And ultimately, he was able to get a knockdown on Tommy Fury. Whether or not you want to say it was a slip or not, the referee, like I said, like you kind of said, questionable at times, but he gave it as an official knockdown. So I think it is impressive that he was able to get a knockdown. But Tommy Fury looked like the better boxer, and when they showed the statistics after the fight, I mean, Tommy Fury literally won in every single statistic. And I would say it probably should have been a unanimous decision, but it wasn't. It was still a split decision. But I just think Tommy Fury looked like the better boxer. He was the better boxer, but I will be excited to see the rematch, and I think this kind of gets into that point that it's going to happen. The rematch will happen, and I'll be excited to see what Jake Paul is able to do if he's able to close the gap even more, and potentially keep improving, and then make this a more competitive fight. Because ultimately, it was a competitive fight, but Tommy looked the better boxer throughout. He looked pretty comfortable, and he looked like he was able to get more punches off, more power punches off. He looked more comfortable in the ring, I would say. Jake Paul looked desperate at times.
Yeah, there was times, because I mean it's just the unexperiencedness that Jake has. I mean, he's never really been in there with a boxer per se. I mean, he's fought Anderson Silva, he's fought Tyron Woodley, but those weren't boxers. And I mean, to a certain extent, Jake kind of faltered back to he was just looking for the over. He was really telegraphing his punches to where you could tell when he was going to throw the overhand. But
Mm-hmm.
even though that you almost can tell when it's coming, it's hard to it's coming, but it was still landing. I mean, it was
Mm-hmm.
still there to get. And Tommy was having some trouble with that, because I think Jake landed some of the harder shots in this fight,
Mm-hmm.
but Tommy was able to piece him up more with nicer combos, nice 1-2s, was catching with some uppercuts. I think he was starting to get that towards the end of the fight. The uppercut was there for the taking,
Mm-hmm.
but I think if there is a rematch, which it probably is, I think Tommy's going to highly benefit from that, just because of the years he's had in the game. He's going to be able to work this out better with his team, and more capitalize on the mistakes that Jake was making. Because I mean, yeah, you're right. At times, Jake just kind of looked like he didn't know what to do. I mean, there was points where he was looking desperate. He was just throwing overhands and he was missing wildly. But I mean, he's only been boxing for 5 years, and this is where he's gotten. I mean, there's not really much like it's not like we're picking apart a world title fight where it's like, you know,
Well,
the number one and number two ranked in the world. You know, this guy's widely missing punches, but how they marketed this fight made it look like it was
no,
a world.
and we saw it after the fight. I mean, Tommy Fury had the shirt that said world champion or
Yeah,
whatever.
I don't know how they snuck that shirt on him. I think that's the only thing that like I mean it's all good fun. I mean this stuff is kind of like marketed to us the younger heads, but I think it kind of like when I see shit like that I'm like what the hell are you doing here, man? Like with making belts and stuff just for these
Hey,
fights. It's a bit ridiculous.
I think it adds. I think it is a little bit ridiculous, but at the same time, it adds a level of fun to it. Kind of makes it like
I
you're actually
guess.
fighting for something. You know what I mean? Obviously, the point is, I mean, we know both of these fighters. Even though Tommy is a real boxer, he's not at that level to be a number one boxer in the world or anything like that. Be an actual
No.
world champion. Of course, he's not his brother. He's not Tyson Fury. But you know, I think it adds a level of fun to this fight. Where if we saw Jake Paul win, he would have had a belt, and we saw Tommy win, and he had a belt. I think it adds a little different aspect
Yeah,
to it. It's fun.
because obviously belts are better like to commercialize
Because
and shit
everyone
like that.
associates a
Everyone
belt
wants to see,
with
yeah. Everyone
exactly.
wants to see a belt, but it's also kind of funny to see Tommy crying and stuff
Yeah,
after beating
I,
Jake Paul and
I will
celebrating like
say
how he did. It's a bit funny, but
it's a
you
bit.
know.
I would say that's the only thing where like it's a little bit shameless in my opinion because I understand it's he's happy he won and this basically his career was kind of on the line with this fight because he is the real boxer and I
I
mean
mean,
his
he
own,
was the underdog to going into this fight. I mean, the betters had him as the underdog, and
but
I guess
his
it's
own
like a big
father
middle
said that they were
finger.
going to change like his own father said that he had to change his name if he lost so there was a
Yeah,
lot on
no,
the line.
there was a lot of lobbies. I mean, obviously, what his family, the pressure his family put. Even you know, Tyson said that he would have to change his name or he's not going to leave the
And
country.
he was in
He was going
the
to stay there. They're going
he
to
was
leave
in
him
the
there.
crowd right there to see it. So if he had gotten knocked out or something, it would have pretty much been the end of his life. I mean, not just his boxing career, but it would have been his end of his life.
Yeah, but I think for the most part he was able to weather this fight well. I mean, there was that knockdown, but you know, I think it's one of those knockdowns to where he catches them right at the perfect time to where he's off balance. It's like it's technically a knockdown, but it's not like you know Deontay Wilder's knockdown on his freaking brother Tyson Fury, where you know the
Yeah.
lights are out, he's you know full on Undertaker comes back.
Yeah.
It's different. It
Yeah.
is a knockdown, but it wasn't like oh my god, he's out of it or like he's wobbly on wobble legs. But
Yeah.
Jake landed the harder punches. I think what he's just lacking experience realistically.
Yeah.
I think Jake is a proper a professional boxer. You say he's a somewhat above an amateur, but he's definitely
I think I agree with that.
he's up there. He's I mean in the influencer space, I think he's
Of course.
arguably the best.
But I would say from what I've seen now, like I don't think anybody can be critical of Jake Paul and be like, oh well, he's not a real boxer. He doesn't fight real boxers. He's just kind of in there for the money or whatever. I think he's really trying to take it seriously. We already kind of knew that, but this kind of cements himself, in my opinion, as like you got to take him a little bit more serious because he hung over. He didn't get knocked out. He went the full distance, 8 rounds with Tommy Fury, who some considered to be a well, not
To be
some
a professional,
considered. He is a professional boxer. He's a real boxer.
8-0
And
record.
ultimately he might not be the best in the world, but he is a professional boxer, and we know the ties obviously with Tyson Fury and all of that, the whole family. So I think I'm impressed by Jake Paul overall. But I wanted to ask you this because you kind of hinted at it. Obviously, we do expect the rematch clause to be activated. They already talked about it. Jake was hinting at the fact that he had a little bit of an illness. He was injured, blah, blah, blah. I'm not buying any of that. But when the rematch clause is activated, do you expect this fight to go similarly? Do you expect Tommy to beat Jake again?
Yeah, I expect it to go the same way. I mean, Tommy just has so much more experience in this moment, and they're going to be able to go back into the drawing board and just kind of figure out what went wrong and to capitalize off Jake's mistakes. And not to say Jake's going to go in there and fight the exact same fight, but there's levels to this, and I think you know there's not a crazy gap, but there's still that gap to where Tommy's still ahead of Jake in that boxing IQ that Jake just doesn't have. I mean, there's not enough time in the day for Jake to catch up to that IQ. And I mean, it's not a knock on him. I mean, look, it's just how it is. But I think Jake's gonna go through with it, obviously, because that's how Jake is. I mean, Jake would fight anybody, but I think it's gonna turn out the same way.
And so, what do you think the ceiling for both of these guys is? And start off with Tommy Fury after potentially getting this fight win. He's still undefeated, and he's going to get the rematch, potentially going to be staying undefeated after that. What do you think his ceiling is as a professional boxer? And then Jake Paul, what do you think the farthest he can go is?
I think Tommy could crack maybe top 20, top 15 in the world, maybe. He's still he's 23 years old. I mean, he's still really, really young. If he dedicates himself to like the 8 more years in the sport, he could definitely be around in the pool. I don't think he'll ever be a world champion or nothing, but that's probably as far as he goes. I mean, that's admirable. Not a lot of people can say, yeah, I was top 20 in the world
Well,
at anything.
yeah, only
But
19 people at a time could say that. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So,
like, not a lot of people can. And as far as Jake, I mean, I think as his ceiling is really just being a professional boxer to like the definition of like, oh yeah, he's a pro.
mhm.
And I think what his scene, I think what's the crescendo to all this whole Jake Paul thing is the KSI fight. I think that's what it's
I was
all
gonna
going to
ask
come
you about that. Yeah.
is well it's all going to go down to. But I mean, what do you think? Do you think on first on Tommy and Jake?
I mean, I think that, for Tommy, obviously, he definitely has a higher ceiling in terms of where he could go professionally than compared to Jake. I think it's impressive for Jake to even just be where he's at right now. So if Jake is able to do any better than that, obviously, you would like, if he keeps up with boxing, you would hope at some point he would get a actual victory against a real boxer, because right now the only real boxer he's faced, he's now taking an L to. So I think his ceiling potentially is nothing like being top 20 in the world or anything like that. But I think he can, have a good career ultimately.
Yeah,
Maybe
I
get
think
some
he could.
wins,
Yeah, like
against professional boxers, get some other wins, and actually be, taken seriously. I think that's the ceiling where, like, we're at some point, everyone is going to take Jake Paul seriously in the sport, and that's kind of his ceiling. But with Tommy, I think he could obviously go a little bit further. I don't think he'll ever be a no world champion, like you said, or anything like that. But I think he already is kind of now taken seriously, and I think his ceiling could potentially be a top 20, maybe a top 25, something like that. But I don't think he could be anything near close to his brother, obviously.
Yeah, I think they're just in different areas. I mean, Tommy's already bit well off with money. I mean, it's not that's usually the driving thing that drives these guys is like, they want to better their lives and put themselves in that better position of being, world champion means you bring in a lot of money.
Yeah,
but
and I think Tommy
well off and a bit different.
I think Tommy also has other aspirations. I mean, he's been on Love Island. He's done, things like that. I mean, he could be a model at this point. I mean, he could literally be a male model. So, I mean, I don't know exactly if his head is going to be in boxing 100% forever. So I think his ceiling might be a little bit different to where I think Jake Paul, he's kind of fully committed to it at this point. He's going to stick with it. But I wanted to ask you this question, and you already hinted at it, kind of probably the final talking point about this fight, about Jake Paul. Do you think this KSI Jake Paul fight will happen? And if it does, who do you think will win this fight?
I think it has to happen. I mean, this is the fight, in the entire YouTube scene has been throbbing and freaking drooling at the bit for. I mean, this is what we wanted.
We did see KSI smoking on that Jake Paul pack after that fight.
Yeah, he's a bit, he's kicking Jake ways down because, I mean, that's what these guys do to each other. They've been planting the seed for this fight for so long. And so it's when we finally get it. This fight might like crack 1 million pay-per-view buys. That's how big it is, and that's like crazy to say for like any type of fighting.
That's Floyd Mayweather numbers right there.
Those are literally like world class, number one in the world type numbers. And coming from two YouTube guys who weren't boxers, weren't fighters at all, that'd be insane. But I mean, I've always backed KSI since the beginning. I mean, I've been a KSI supporter for like 10 years of my life.
Do you actually think he's the better boxer though?
I think I'd have to give it. I think Jake's a better boxer right now because I think KSI hasn't had the moment to really show his boxing skill enough. I mean, we saw him, fight another Tommy. I mean, FaZe Temper, but I mean, FaZe Temper is no boxer. I mean, that is not really one to hang your hat on. He knocked him out like he should, but I think KSI really has to put himself in there with a guy with a proper dance partner because that's where we see these magic fights, these must see fights happen because it takes two to make that fight. Because you can spark guys all you want 10 seconds in, like Nate Robinson or some shit like that. But people want to see, back and forth. They want to see you go, get knocked down, get hit hard and go through that. Like we kind of saw with Jake with Tyron Woodley. That's why I think Jake has his record right now looks like the better boxer. I mean, he's fought guys more of a bigger name, tougher.
He fought Anderson Silva. It's a pretty big
name.
I
mean, he had to go to a place KSI hasn't had to go yet, I think, in my opinion. Even though he had to fight Logan. Logan's very tough, but it's different levels.
But Logan also doesn't have the same experience factor either. I mean, Logan is only difficult because of the intangibles he has. He's a huge guy, really
ripped. He's a big ass guy.
He's obviously has the physical advantage, but KSI was able to get the better of him. I mean, I think he deserves a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, now to think about it, KSI has been actually knocked down before. I mean, Logan Paul knocked him down, but I think there's different levels to how hard people hit. I think Tyron Woodley hits a lot harder than Logan Paul, but not by a long margin. But I mean, there's a bit levels, but obviously I'm gonna back KSI in that fight. But I think from the resume standpoint, Jake's the better fighter.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think my final point on that is if this fight does happen, ultimately it will happen because I don't think this is like a, even like, I mean, obviously Ryan Garcia and Tank
And
Davis
Tank are
is
finally
happening now.
fighting. Yeah,
But
finally
for the
happening.
most part, they kind of tippy-toed around it and wanted to avoid it. This type of thing between KSI and Jake Paul, at this point, they know it's going to happen at some point and they're just waiting. They're waiting for the proper moment. So when it does happen, I think ultimately, as of right now, this could change. I think Jake Paul is better at this very moment. He has the better resume, even though he just lost. I think overall, with his resume and also the work he's put in, he's probably the better boxer at the moment. And obviously, that could change. I mean,
It could. I mean,
KSI,
KSI has a fight coming up.
yeah,
I it's leaving my mind the name of the guy he's fighting, but I think he's a pro. I believe he's a pro. So I mean, KSI is gonna have his moment to try and
exactly.
take that position
Yeah.
back. But
This is
we'll see
obviously
in time.
it's very subject to change. I would just say
Yeah,
at this very moment, if they fought, I would bet on Jake Paul, but that could change. And I would like KSI to win though, because I'm probably more of a KSI fan, obviously.
yeah.
So do you have any final thoughts on this fight? Obviously, highly anticipated.
I think that finally wraps it up for me. I mean, it was exciting, and I'll be happy to watch it again. I mean,
Yeah.
I love the excitement of big fights.
Yeah. So subscribe to this channel, Shoot It Straight 2, for more American sports content, any kind of sports content, NBA, NFL, boxing, fighting, MMA. Subscribe to the channel. We talk about all of that on this channel. Drop us in a comment down below. What did y'all think of this fight? Are you happy to see Jake Paul finally lose? Let us know in the comments down below. Drop a like on the video. But I think without further ado, we can get out of here.
Yeah, let's go.
I'm Zach,
I'm G.
and we'll see y'all next time for another video. Peace.